Well, hello and welcome. And I hope you're excited today because I'm excited because we have a great guest joining us today and a lot to talk about. Of course, my name is Guy Stevens. I'm the founder and executive director of the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint. If you're not familiar with us, began the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint about 3 years ago, beginning around this idea that we wanted to reduce and eliminate the use of restraint and seclusion in schools around the country. And of course, our mission continues to grow. We don't want to see anyone being restrained or secluded anywhere. But beyond that, we really want to work to improve the way that kids and youth are supported, especially when it comes to behavior. We find a lot of kids are having a lot of things done to them in the name of behavior that are having really poor outcomes. So we want to better work with and support children and youth. We want to see safer schools for students, teachers, and staff. We really want to do all we can to make the world a better place, right? So I'm really excited today to have our guest with us, Dr. Mona Delahooke. If you've been following the Alliance for any time, you probably know that we are big fans of Dr. Delahooke's work. Mona's going to be joining us today to talk about her brand new book. And I know many of you have probably ordered it already. And the book, of course, I need to hold it up in front of the camera here, is called Brain and Body Parenting: How to Stop Managing Behavior and Start Raising Joyful, Resilient Kids. Fantastic book. We're, of course, going to be taking questions during the interview. So I'm going to be asking Mona some questions. We're going to be having a conversation. And Mona and I can just kind of ramble on a long time having conversations. But I want to invite you as the audience to put your questions in the chat. We'd like to, hear from you. And on that note, I'd love you even now just to put in who you are and where you're from. It's always exciting to see where people are joining us from. Do want to remind you that, as always, we are recording this session today. This will be available after the fact as a video on YouTube, on Facebook, and we also make it available as an audio podcast. So with all of that, let me get to the really exciting part here. I want to go ahead and introduce my friend, Dr. Mona Delahooke. And Dr. Delahooke is a licensed clinical psychologist with more than 30 years of experience, which means that you started when you were about 3, I believe, right?
5.5.
That's right. That's right. Caring for children and their families. You're a senior faculty member at the Profectum Foundation, an organization dedicated to supporting families of neurodiverse children, adolescents, and adults. You hold the highest level of endorsement in the field of infant and toddler mental health in California as a reflective practice mentor. You are, of course, a frequent speaker, trainer, and consultant. I was lucky enough to take some of your training previously. Absolutely fantastic. I think it should be required training. Probably, I initially would say for every teacher, for every parent, I could probably keep adding the everys on there. And, of course, you do a lot of work with schools and public agencies and parents. And, really, you are dedicated to promoting compassionate relationship based neurodevelopmental interventions for children with developmental, behavioral, emotional, and learning differences. I would go on to say that I can say this in full sincerity. You're one of my favorite people on this planet. And I would say to you that the compassion and the science that you bring together and all that you do is truly making, I think, a difference for kids and for youth and for families all across the world. Of course, you're the author of another of my favorite books, Beyond Behavior. And that was, I think, the book that I first was introduced to some of your work. And what amazed me was how you took some of this complicated science and made it approachable and made it so that people could understand and apply it in ways to better support children. So that book, of course, has been foundational. One that not only have I probably bought copies to give away, but recommend it to many people. And of course, we're going to be talking about your brand new book here in a second. But you've done a lot of work. You've got a really popular website as well, monadelahooke.com, and you cover a lot of topics there that are always really interesting. So this, I believe, is your third time back, but you and I got to do something together just a couple weeks ago, and we're going to be doing something together again next week. So always a pleasure, Mona. Again, really appreciate your time and you joining us today.
Well, it's always a pleasure for me. And, doing this kind of work and trying to make the world a safer place for our children isn't possible without people like you. And so I'm just so grateful that we met. And there's so much to do. There's
Absolutely.
so much to do. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
children are still suffering. So,
That's right. That's right.
yeah, it's a joy to be able to join you. And you're right, we could talk about this, about different things all day long. But so
Absolutely. And for some reason you're froze there for a second, and
happy to,
hopefully.
and second book.
Oh,
Uh-oh.
sorry, Mona. I had you frozen there for a second, and it could have been
Oh, okay.
me, or it could have been you. Sometimes things happen on the internet, but of course,
Yeah.
we're here today to really talk about your new book, Brain and Body Parenting. How to stop managing behavior and start raising joyful and resilient kids. And I'm sure at this point you've done a lot of interviews and a lot of work to spread the word about this book. So I
Mhm.
appreciate you joining us to talk about it here and talk about really kind of what this book is and why you did it. But before we get there, I gave, of course, a little bit of your bio, but
Okay.
the piece that I think that isn't in your bio that really is always interesting about your story is kind of how you got to where you are. And really what I'm talking about is how you kind of went through what you went through in terms of getting your education and doing the work that you were doing, but how you took this turn in pivoting to the work that you're doing related to kind of the brain science and all that. So I wonder if you might just tell us a very brief version of kind of how Mona Delahooke is where you are and kind of what you went to get there.
Hmm. Well, wow, that's such a great and loaded question. Like, how far back do I go? Do I go back to my mother's pregnancy with me, or, being the firstborn child of immigrant parents, or here's a good one, being being mute as a child. I was
Mm,
sent for psychological testing when I was 5 years old because I couldn't talk outside of my own home. I was mute at school. I couldn't talk, and so my background, I think, set me up for a life of exploration. Um, the behaviors that I had as a child um, were really an indication of how I was experiencing the world. So
mm,
it doesn't surprise me that I went into the field of psychology when I found out, once I got over my fear of speaking in public in school, like junior year of college, I I realized, I found out about this field of psychology, and why do people do what they do, right? And it was such a perfect fit. I went straight through and got a PhD when I was 26. And so, yeah, so that was a deep dive. The
and
first
I actually learned some things about you I didn't know already. So
Oh, did you know I was, selectively or electively mute as a child? Have I ever?
no, I don't believe I did, but maybe I did at some point. But
Yeah. Oh, wow. Well, I haven't written about it in either of the books. Maybe
okay,
that would
okay,
be in another one. But I
yeah.
was thinking about my history the other day, and I really do think it started really young.
Mm,
When you are a highly sensitive individual, there's these words, highly, HSP, highly sensitive person, that got codified in research, and some great books. But I realized I soaked in the environment, and I just wanted to know as much as I could. But when I after I graduated with a PhD in psychology and a very much knowledge in attachment theory, which I loved, the idea that humans need each other and they need
mhm,
nurturing
mhm,
and all that. I had a lot of education. Um, you know, Going in to real life, the world isn't set up to truly understand stress and trauma in the way that cap is captured by what came to be my real education. And that was when I became an infant mental health specialist and dove into the body, the nervous
mhm,
system, the
mhm,
body,
mhm,
the
mhm,
body's reaction to being human. We are wired to seek safety.
Mhm,
on a
mhm,
subconscious level as human beings. There's no controversy about that. We are hardwired to seek safety, and that seeking safety is demonstrated through how we move our bodies. And as you know, with Beyond Behaviors, um, once I had an understanding of the human stress response and what it looked like, and then ended up in hundreds and hundreds of IEPs and school situations where I saw children really being either diagnosed or given a diagnosis or a label, such as a conduct disorder, oppositional defiance, or maybe that's something related to autism, right? Like
mhm,
like
mhm,
some
mhm,
inappropriate label given to human behaviors that I knew were stress responses. That started this idea that it's we have a gap in our understanding of human suffering in our children, and it's not that the evidence is really coming out in neuroscience rather than specific studies, because there are a lot of studies that looked at how you modify behaviors,
mhm, mhm,
and you can modify behaviors. You can modify behaviors in animals and in humans. um, that's not really the point. The point is, now that we understand trauma and we understand the purposes of movement in the human body, maybe we can talk about what those movements mean. Um, but like children being restrained or secluded for
mhm, mhm,
having those types of behaviors that are very desperate, safety-seeking behaviors.
mhm, mhm. I think about the work that you did in Beyond Behaviors, and you know, having heard you spoken before and being involved in some of the training you did, I know that you kind of went through this portion of your career where you began to question things and began to, kind of as you mentioned, the curiosity
Mhm.
and the prevailing approaches that were being taken to behaviors were really solely focused on the behaviors and changing the behaviors. And when you came out with Beyond Behaviors, it was really kind of this deep dive into the science of behavior and looking beyond, of course, the behaviors,
Yeah.
because so often the temptation is here's what's happening, here's what I want to stop, and here's what I'm going to do to stop it. And people assuming that all behavior is a choice, and that if you would make different choices or if you would try harder. And of course, your work took the work of people like Dr. Stephen Porges and the polyvagal theory and
Mhm.
explained that work to the fact that not all behaviors are a matter of choice, that kind of the top down and bottom up behaviors, and
Right.
really began to, I mean, I think that the work that you were doing was really about shifting that paradigm from all behaviors intentional and needs to be controlled to what's the importance of understanding trauma and connection and compassion.
Mhm.
And you did that beautifully in Beyond Behaviors. And, I think that book, is a really valuable tool to a lot of people. And again, through your experience, you were in IEP meetings and working with children. Um, but moving to the new book, Brain and Body Parenting,
Mhm.
you've kind of taken a lot of that ideology and applied it to parenting. And I think that's really important because thinking about some of the challenges that are happening in schools and in other settings, um, wow, there's an opportunity for us even as parents to begin applying better things. I think my kids now are Cooper is 16, Audrey is 12.
Mhm.
But I think back to not that long ago, all of the parenting advice that I got. And with where I am today, I would say that a lot of that advice was not very good advice. And
Oh,
I was talking to a young mother recently who was kind of in that same crossfire of getting all of this advice. But there's still, I think, a lot of bad advice out there in terms of parenting. So, I guess the first question, thinking about brain and body parenting, what inspired you to do a book really targeting parents? Um, well, let me start there. What inspired you to do a parenting book?
well, it was in my pocket as my dream book. Like, I wanted to write a book that that had a lot of the the groundwork that I put out in Beyond Behaviors.
Mhm.
And when I wrote Beyond Behaviors, I didn't know. When you write a book, you just don't know if it's really making sense to you,
Right,
and
right.
only you, and maybe your friends and family and your mother. But the oh my gosh, the tidal wave of parents emailing me and messaging me and really saying, I can kind of breathe a sigh of relief because now I'm hearing someone that understands me, that
Mhm,
may not have ever heard that before, say from their well-meaning school district
mhm,
or
mhm, mhm,
teacher,
mhm.
right? That was so satisfying, and I just realized that, in a private practice, you can only see so many families, right? It's you can see several families a
Right,
day,
right.
but the ability to write and to reach a wider range of support is in a book so much. It's just so satisfying. So it was in my back pocket, but what really inspired me to write it was the COVID lockdown, because I had 15 conferences that were canceled or went virtual, and all of a sudden I had all these travel plans canceled and tons of time to write, and I wrote nonstop for 9 months, like 8 hours a day. It was
Mhm, mhm,
amazing, and
mhm,
it
mhm.
was fun, because this is the kind of stuff I just want. I think I want the public to understand, to know what um, what isn't necessarily like an opinion, but what is grounded about what we really know about how humans develop.
Right, right.
And the research on how do humans develop self-regulation, meaning the ability to be in the world and face what may come your
Mhm,
way.
mhm,
And that literature is very, very grounded in relationships,
mhm,
the
mhm, mhm.
science of relationships. So yeah, so I wrote it to have a book that was that kind of covered soup to nuts. And from birth to through about middle school, early middle school, and then I was going to write it in a few years, but the pandemic lockdown gave me the opportunity to write it now.
Well,
Um,
and I mean that's one of those silver linings, right? I mean, there have been things about the pandemic that have been absolutely horrible, and lots of lives have been affected in very negative ways. But there have been some of these silver linings where I think your book is really a gift to so many,
mm,
uh, and these are times that need a science driven, compassionate approach to helping kids. These are difficult times for us as parents, for children, for everyone. And there's so much to be gained from your approach, that I think the timing couldn't have been
mm,
more meaningful, in doing this work, and really appreciate what you've done. Um, I
thanks.
know that you were doing a lot of research for the book, and some of that research was putting out things on social media, and asking
Yeah.
for. So how did you do your research? What did you learn during that research when you were beginning to think about the book?
Well, it is so fun to put out a question and have hundreds of people respond right away. It's just so satisfying. Back in the day, when you did that kind of um, qualitative research, like surveys and studies like that, back in the day, you'd have to mail things or
Mhm.
send out emails and consents and everything. But on social media, there's implied consent, and people love to share with you.
Right.
So that combined with all the parents in my practice that I've seen over the decades, these questions, I kind of categorize the recurring questions, and it was so fun to write the book with the community, like with
Mhm, mhm,
what the Facebook community is very active and incredible. Some of you are on here now, like Beth Tolley.
mhm.
Our friends are so, they helped me write the book. And the other thing that I'm thinking of that came out during the book and after as well, because oh my goodness, there's been some great spin-offs to the book. Like there was an article in the New Yorker
Mhm,
that put my book up front, and the author was nice about the book, but the article was really saying, what is gentle parenting, and is it
mhm,
raising a bunch of kids that are with permissive parenting? And so
mhm,
and then that jumped to a conversation on NPR about what is gentle parenting a thing. And so this has allowed me to actually realize that there's so much confusion and noise out there
mhm, mhm,
about, is there a right parenting, a correct, in air quotes, parenting style?
mhm.
And what I'm so excited about with, with this my latest baby here, is that there isn't a right parenting
Right.
style. I mean, the research, you couldn't do a clinical study on the right parenting style because it would be too complex. But what is right, in my mind, is what is going to work. What tool or technique in this moment is going to work for this child, depending on where their nervous system is and where your nervous system is as a parent and what they need in the moment. So, brain body parenting kind of hovers above all the techniques, and it draws from those great tools that we have from the different strands, like mindful parenting and conscious parenting and
Mhm, mhm,
positive parenting, but it actually also helps you customize your parenting to the child's need and to your need in real time. And I think the I think that's why the it got it got noticed by, like, the next big
mhm,
idea
mhm,
club,
mhm,
because it's
mhm.
more customizing parenting
Right,
and
right.
associating with a given parenting style, if that
Mhm,
makes
mhm,
sense.
mhm. Yeah, and, that was actually one of the points that, when I read the book and, that there was no single path to parenting every child.
Yeah,
That was the point that you made, and you
yeah.
kind of talked about this unique brain and body platform was the word that you were using,
Mm.
um, and how that required an individual approach. And of course, parenting should be individualized, right? No two individuals are the same, but very often our approaches become that way. Become there's a one size fits all, and I love and again, while there may not be one path, I think there's a lot of principles,
Mhm.
and I love some of the principles that I think that you bring into this, which is the importance of understanding the brain and the importance of understanding a child's nervous system, the
Yeah,
importance of understanding the need for safety and connection, and all of these things that you talk about in the book, and you talked about in Beyond Behaviors, and how kids need to feel connected to be able to thrive. I think those are all such important principles. I mean, to me, one of the revelations that I've had more and more over the years is just the importance of treating children like people. If I would not do what I'm doing, to you, I shouldn't be doing it to a child, right?
right.
And I think often there are a lot of very punitive approaches out there that do a lot of harm. So talk to me a little bit about this idea of the platform, this brain and body platform. What are you really getting at with that, and how does the platform then determine how you support the child?
Yeah, what you do in the moment. So the platform, which is shorthand for the nervous system, because we're never just a brain or a body. It's not. It's connected. There's been a lot of interest in the brain, of course, since the decade of the brain of the '90s. We There was all that great research on the brain, but the brain's getting its operating instructions from the feedback from the body. So think about the platform as where something is landing in a child, in an individual. So if your first question is, what's the strength of the platform? How is that brain body doing, both in ourselves and in the child? But let's just say you have a child who's refusing to leave the park, and you're saying, okay, it's time to go home, and maybe a 5-year-old, it's time to go home, and they're like, you know, no, I'm not going to go home, and that their face is red, and
Mhm, mhm,
they are gritting their teeth. And here's where we have an opportunity to ask a different question, other than, is this child misbehaving or not, or do they need me to just, you know, give them some discipline? Is, what is the strength of the platform? A child who is normally cooperative, and who is a good kid, is if that platform is shaky, meaning their stress response is in control. They are not able to meet that demand in that
mhm,
moment,
mhm,
because their platform is shaky. If we say, okay, what's the platform strength? If it's shaky, then we go to another direction, which is away from discipline and towards, okay, how do we stabilize the platform enough to have us get to the car without a huge scene and a cost to the body budget, which is another phrase in the book.
mhm, mhm, mhm,
The actual body budget, Lisa Feldman Barrett's work, that we have something called allostasis. It's the homeostasis in our physical body.
mhm,
That our body budget, a kid who can't leave the park but knows, the rules, may have a depleted body budget, and there's not enough resources for them to be able to comply. So
mhm,
then our technique becomes adding a little deposit. We're not permissive. We're not letting the child run the show. We're just recognizing, oh, at this moment, I'm going to sit and hang out with the child for a second and just resonate with, this is a big
right,
ask, buddy.
right.
This is a big ask, buddy. And do a tiny little deposit. And they'll say, yeah, I don't really want to leave the park. And then you're off to the races because they're talking to you.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
So, I don't even know what your question was, but oh, the platform. Yeah.
Right,
So
right,
the platform, the body budget in chapter 1, those are kind of some of the big ideas that I
right,
that I
right.
put in there, that if you
Mhm,
understand your child's and your own body, you're actually going to be able to understand their psychology better.
mhm. One of the things I love that you did with this book is that a lot of parenting books cover, the first 3 to 12 months, right? They don't cover much after that. And, I love the way this book was kind of put together
Mhm.
in really covering a journey. Now, we didn't get quite as far as Beth wanted. Beth said, when is the book on teenagers coming out? And that may be something to follow up with. But
That
you,
is the book, right? That is
right,
the
right,
book.
right, right. But you certainly covered the journey, and as I was reading it again, um, um, kind of thinking back to my own experiences as a father, I kept coming back to this idea, like, I wish I had this then. And in
Oh,
fact, I recently sent a copy. Well, actually, I recently sent 2 copies out to parents and young parents that I thought would benefit from it. But one of the things that I love in your work, and again, that you do in this book, is you are compassionate to parents. You understand the difficulty involved in parenting, but you also make the point for them of the importance of their own brain and body platform, and
yeah.
how they must be well regulated and adjusted. Can you talk a little bit about that? The importance of kind of the parent, and the need
Mhm.
to be compassionate to yourself as well.
Yeah. It's linked to the understanding that nervous systems calm each other down. And I we have to not look at that as a another deal of pressure or guilt for parents, because I think one of the things that came out through the pandemic, and even recently, there's a big study that came out this week, that parents are still feeling burned out. There are so many parents that are suffering still. Imagine what everyone went through
Mhm.
in the dual role of teaching and working from home, or whatever iteration you found yourself in. Um, that idea that we matter and the stress level that parents carry, and the lack of support that parents feel, is something that I devoted a whole chapter on,
Mhm, mhm,
because the transmission of regulation, the transmission is improved when you feel okay. So there's a good chance that your child will feel better if you're feeling better. And again, it's not meant to put pressure on parents, but just to let us understand that we matter.
mhm,
Our stress loads, our body budgets matter. And the primary researcher on one great researcher, Sunil Luther, on mothers, she did this study and wrote Who Mothers Mommy, and just found that the support level for moms in particular, but I think also for dads too, is not sufficient. And think
mhm,
about
mhm,
single parents and parents who
mhm,
are who are just trying to get food on the table. Um, yeah, it's a big deal.
mhm, mhm,
So but in that chapter, literally, it's, a few seconds to hours. So it only takes a few seconds to try to find ways to calm your nervous system down. So I really didn't want it to be like, oh no, here's another thing I have to do. But I can take a second and maybe make myself feel better through a shift, maybe in a thought, or a shift in a breath, or a shift
mhm,
in where I put my feet or feel my back against a chair.
mhm, mhm,
So
mhm,
there's ways we can shift our body. And yeah, I was talking to a mom yesterday, and she said something like, "Oh, I wasn't very brain body today." And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, I let my child have an extra 20 minutes on the iPad watching Coco Melon." And I'm like, "Good for you. That is brain body. That was self
right,
compassion."
right, 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 right,
And I was like, that is in the book. There is no right way to do it. If you need to get through that hour and you put your child on a little sweet little cartoon, it's not going to wreck your child.
right,
We have
right.
to give ourselves this breathing room to know that our children are pretty robust,
Mhm.
and they're we're we have to give ourselves leeway as
Yeah,
parents. So if you're a
absolutely,
parent
absolutely.
right now, be gentle on yourself. It's the best thing you can do for your child if you take care of yourself or
It's
your body.
such an important point. I know we're getting to about time. I promised you today that we would try to keep things short, because I know you've got another obligation. But if anybody has a question that's in the chat, feel free to put that in, and we'll try to get to one or two. I'm going to ask you a question, and we'll see if we get any other questions here. But we do have to wrap up here shortly. And I know you've talked about the book and talked about the journey, probably to a number of folks now. Um, anything anything tell me something that surprising, or maybe something you haven't shared before about the book, or maybe what your hope is for the book.
Mm. Well, actually, what surprised me, um, is what's happening, and it's kind of fun. It's opening up a new conversation. It's kind of, I think it's invigorated the conversation about, is there a correct parenting style?
Right.
And I think that's a great. It's controversial. It gets people talking, but it also helps highlight, that just as in our education system, we have focused on behavior management,
Hmm,
in
hmm.
the parenting. The see, I've been in the professional world for a long time, and the parenting world's interesting. It's kind of its own system in a way. And in the parenting world, I am finding that there is this tendency to think that there's only one way to do things. And so I'm delighted that people are now talking. I was delighted that, um, you know, a, the people at NPR thought that the question about what is gentle parenting
Right.
was worthy of a whole hour. And I was on there with Mercedes Samudio, who is an incredible therapist and parenting expert, to talk about like what we're really talking about is so many different things, but that is leading to, for many of us, breaking intergenerational patterns that of parenting that we may we may be trying to not do what maybe happened to us as parents. And
Mhm,
then
mhm.
many people also may have had trauma in their background. So
Yep.
this whole idea is so powerful on how we can do better, but at the same time having so much self-compassion and understanding that there is no way to do parenting perfectly. And I have a lot of parents who've had really rough histories who are trying so hard to not make any mistakes. And for those parents, I want to say there is so much to hope to have, because our you don't just have one chance.
Right.
Our brains are always updating to predict new things. And so that's why self-compassion is a big part of the book, and that it's research based. So it actually improves our physical and mental health.
Yeah. I hear you, and I think that's really important because I know, my life, it's been about doing better as I've known better, learning and trying to do better along the way. But I read your book, and I briefly, and you can't tell anybody this, although we're broadcasting live. I thought, what would it be like to have another child? Like knowing what I know now, and almost like in this inspirational moment. Not that I want to have any more children, and my children are wonderful and perfect, but you really do think like, oh,
Oh,
wow, what would I do differently? I mean, I remember a lot of the bad advice out there. I do want to take one question and then I'll let you
okay.
go
But
because I know
I
that
have to
you've got.
respond to what you just said,
Okay.
because I, I'm doing it right now. No, I did not have another child, and I
Well,
did not.
that's what I was right to ask here. No, no, this is big news. I wanted something
Breaking
on
news!
the podcast nobody knew before, right?
I didn't have another child. I did not adopt another child, even though I have thought about that a long time. But I actively, like, in a parenting village of my granddaughter. And so from birth on, I am in now, now that I have integrated the information, because I didn't with my own children. Let's just say
Mhm,
and
mhm.
it's never perfect, but I'm
Right.
experiencing what it's like to put some of these principles into place as a person who's not the parent.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
And that just may be the topic of my next book, because toddlers are so fun and delightful if you know what you're looking at. And now I know what I'm looking at, and toddlerhood is a joy.
Yeah.
It is nothing I feared. All the stuff that drove me nuts with my own children, that my granddaughter is doing now, are a piece of cake. So stay tuned for
So
that.
anyone in the area where you live can drop off their young children so that you can do more.
Just bring them here. It's a
That's
joy.
right. That's right, that's right. So one quick question, and then I will
Yeah.
let you go, I promise.
Okay, thanks.
We had a question here. Any advice for getting, our kids' teachers on the same page, besides gifting them your book? And, of course, gifting them a book is always a good idea, but, any other thoughts?
Yeah, my heart goes out to teachers. Um, okay, so if you look at the principles of neurodevelopment, of relational safety, of how we are meant to be in safe in groups, we can easily realize that one teacher with 30 kids, that is asking teachers to burn through their body budget so fast to even try to take care of half the kids in the class, right? And those are the easy ones. So what can we do? I think first of all, just thanking the teachers and helping them know that we realize how much they're doing for our kids, just to build relationships with teachers. And then I think we can use our platforms. We can use our platforms as parents on social media and other places to get more support for parents, because they're getting being asked to do the impossible. And I'm hoping that that my books will help when administrators and policymakers realize, and it's not just my books, it's people like Bruce Perry and
Mhm.
Dan Siegel, Tina Bryson, and Bessel van der Kolk, and Stephen Porges, of course, and Lisa Feldman Barrett. So people who really are studying the cutting edge of development are telling us that there's no two ways around taking care of the caregivers. So we
Mhm.
need to pay teachers more.
Mhm.
We
Mhm.
need to get more warm bodies in the classroom to help them, and not pretend like it's just change in their mind shift. We've got to protect their platforms too. So, but yeah, feel free to gift them the books as well.
Great, great. Well, listen, I want to thank you so much, not only for being here today, but for taking the time and writing the books that you've written and all of the things that you do to share your talents and gift with the world. I know that you are frequently presenting and teaching and doing amazing things. So, Mona, thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much, Guy. I'm so happy to be here. And I just want to also remind people and plug the event next week that you are presenting through the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint on the 13th, on May 13th, right? It's a full day event.
It's May 11th,
I'm
Wednesday,
sorry,
May
May
11th.
11th. Yeah,
Yep.
sorry. May 11th. I will be there with you in the middle of the day. And this is going to be, if you are interested in or have exposure to or know people who are need to find out more about the incidents of seclusion or restraint, please join us next Wednesday, the 11th. That will be a really powerful day. And there are maybe the scholarships are gone already, but join us. It'll be, Guy is doing an amazing job of getting the word out there that we can stop doing those things that we know cause toxic stress and trauma for our kids and for our
Absolutely.
teenagers.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mona. You beat me to it. So I was gonna talk about the event, and I'm so glad to have you do it.
Oh, good.
I will let you go.
I can go and then you can continue talking about it.
All right, sounds good. Well, thank you so much, and I'll look forward to seeing you next week. And from then on, thank you.
Thanks so much for having me. Take care, everybody.
All right, bye bye. So again, I hope everybody enjoyed our interview today. Did want to let you know that we do have that event coming up next week. So Mona kind of beat me to it, but I hope you can join us. And as always, want to thank you for making time out of your day to join us for today's special event. We have another event coming up in 2 weeks, and I don't have the promo for that available today, but I'll be sharing that on Facebook and social media here shortly. So as always, take care, and we look forward to seeing you again very soon. Thanks.